Hey there, educators. Are you tired of feeling stuck trying to teach grade level math content to students who just aren't ready? Do you ever wish you had a clear roadmap for helping your students build connections across math domains while addressing those foundational gaps? Well, I've got something just for you. Our brand new free resource, Transform How We Teach Math in the Middle. This guide is packed with some actionable strategies to help you get clarity on the key math domains for grades 6-8. Build conceptual bridges between topics so your students see how everything connects. Leverage relationships across concepts to simplify your planning and teaching. Design purposeful notes that empower students to think critically. And most importantly, empower your students through meaningful connections that build both understanding and confidence. Each section includes quick tips and insights, plus video breakdown to make implementation easy. And as a bonus, you'll get an exclusive invite to my upcoming webinar series, where I'll dive even deeper into these strategies. Ready to take the stress out of planning and make math happen in your classroom? Head to the show notes and click the link to grab your free guide. Don't wait. This is your chance to transform how your students learn math. Download your guide today. Welcome back to PD for the Soul, where we talk all things education, strategy, and helping students succeed. I'm your host, Lanisha, and today's topic is one that stirs up opinions from students, parents, and teachers alike. Yep, we're talking about assessments, or as I like to call them, the necessary evil that really isn't so evil once we understand them. Now, before we dive in, I want to ground today's discussion with this quote from Fennell, Kobett, and Wray. Assessment of student learning is the responsibility of every school district, every school, and every teacher. Take a moment to let that sink in, because there's a lot to unpack here. Let me be honest, I've seen and heard every complaint about assessments. Students think they're unfair, parents question their validity, and teachers, well, we often feel like we're stuck in the endless cycle of testing. I get it, but here's the thing. Assessments are everywhere, from mechanics to nursing, and just about every career field in between. Assessments are used to evaluate readiness, knowledge, and overall preparedness. And while people in those careers might complain about assessments, the need for them is undeniable. This isn't to say all assessments are created equal or perfect. Far from it. But I'm here to talk about the necessity of assessments, not their biases or flaws. Assessments give us a snapshot of where a student is and help us determine how to guide them forward. So let's break it down. A couple of weeks ago, we touched on formative assessments, those assessments for learning, and their role in providing ongoing feedback for teachers and students. Formative assessments are low stakes, meaning they're not about the grade, but the growth. They help identify strengths, weaknesses, and areas for improvement. On the flip side, summative assessments are assessments of learning. They signify the end of a learning cycle. These are the unit test, final exam, and standardized assessments that often feel high pressure. The problem arises when we, as educators, shift from teaching students how to learn to just teaching them how to pass a test. The better approach? Teach the connections between concepts. When we do this, students are prepared for any skill, standard, or domain that's thrown their way, not just the one at the end of the learning cycle. Now that we're clear on formative assessments, let's dive into our soul talk for the week. I've been reading The Formative 5 by Fennell, Kobett, and Wray, and one statement that stood out to me immediately was from Education Week. So they noted that formative assessments are both widely used and poorly understood. Imagine someone being obsessed with shoes. They buy every new pair they see, but don't know how to wear them. That's how we're treating formative assessments in many classrooms. We use them, but we're not maximizing their potential. The book highlights 5 statements for effective use of assessments, inspired by William and Thompson. Here's a quick rundown. Number 1, clarifying learning intentions and criteria for success. Students need to know where they're going and what it looks like to be successful. Number 2, engineer effective discussions, questions, and tasks. Emphasis on effective. We need to be prepared to go deeper or pivot based on student responses. Number 3, provide feedback that moves learners forward. Feedback is powerful with an effect size of 7/10. It's about guiding, not just grading. Number 4, activate students as owners of their own learning. Students play a huge role in their success. And finally, number 5, activate students as resources for one another. Responsible collaboration can accelerate student learning. While all 5 are important, the Formative 5 focuses on strategies 2 and 3, engineering effective tasks and providing meaningful feedback. These align beautifully with the idea that assessments should be tools for growth. Let's talk about the 5 classroom-based formative assessment techniques introduced in the book. Think of them as an artist's palette where you mix and match based on your students' needs. The first one is observation. As you plan your lesson, consider, what do you want to observe? How would you know if you saw it? What are the potential challenges, whether conceptual or procedural? What misconceptions might you see? And how will you make note of what you observe? The next one is the interview. Consider the following as you plan your lesson. What is the deciding factor in pulling a student to work one-on-one or in a small group? What interview questions would you ask? What are some anticipated student responses? And finally, what follow-up interview questions might you ask? Third is show me. This technique is performance-based and asks students to demonstrate their understanding. How is show me different from observation or interview? That's something that you want to think about. What would you use as a prompt for a show me request during the lesson? What do you want students to show and say as they describe their work? The next one is hinge questioning. This got its name because it is the connection between where students are and our next teacher move to get them to where we need them to be. When I initially read this, I thought of the exit ticket, but then I considered whether there could be multiple points within a lesson where I could create this hinge moment. I concluded that the answer is yes. If I'm in the midst of a lesson and I'm trying to determine whether I need to move on to the next activity or not, I can insert a hinge question that would give me the data I needed to make that decision. The last one is the exit task, but this one is different from the exit ticket that we're all so used to. The difference is it doesn't have to come at the end of a lesson. It can follow up a cluster of lessons. Okay, so let's get real for a moment. One common trend I've noticed is the frequent use of educational terms without a clear understanding of what they actually mean. That's one of the main reasons I decided to relaunch this podcast. I want all my fellow educators to have clarity. My goal isn't to just leave you with terminology and brief descriptions. I want us to dive deeper into these concepts and explore how we can apply them in our classrooms this week. Because I like to keep my solo episodes short, sweet, and to the point though, we're only going to focus on the first 2 strategies today. Let's start with observation. Many of us math teachers plan our lessons by working through the math ourselves and anticipating student responses. To do this effectively, we must pay close attention to how students engage with similar tasks and how they process information. The Formative 5 refers to this skill as professional noticing. Yeah, we're professional noticers, y'all. Professional noticing involves 3 interconnected skills: attending to or paying attention to student strategies, interpreting their understanding, so us making sense of it as the teacher, and deciding how to respond based on what we see. The book gives a helpful example of professional noticing in action using a 7th grade math lesson. The focus of the lesson is determining whether 2 quantities are in a proportional relationship. Students can test for proportionality by using a ratio table or graphing on a coordinate plane to observe whether the graph is a straight line through the origin. When using observation, remember we went over several questions that we needed to consider. So let's use those questions and this example to think about what we should be observing. So first up, what should we expect to see? We should expect to see students recognizing the connection to equivalent fractions. Students should be scaling values using the table or scaling values within the table. Students should be graphing and then connecting their understanding of proportionality. How do we know if we see it? Students drawing and using the ratio tables. We should see that. It should be on their paper. Too often I am in classrooms supporting teachers and students don't have any notes. Their pages are blank. Or there's no expectation for maintaining the notes, so whatever they're writing down is going to end up in the trash can. So, but you know what? I got sidetracked a little bit. We'll get into that in another episode. So back to what we should see. We should see students drawing and using ratio tables. Students should be explaining the connection between their work and proportional relationships. Now, what misconceptions might we observe? Students might struggle with scaling because they don't understand equivalent fractions. Students could be creating tables but not really knowing how to use them to organize their thinking. So maybe they're just drawing the lines but not sure where the numbers go. Students may be unable to recognize or create proportional relationships. Now, after we've seen all of this, how do we record our observations, and then how do we provide feedback? We might take a picture of student work because we're tracking it, because we are keeping notes. Maybe this is a specific student where we're having meetings with the parents or with another team member, so you might take a picture. Maybe we're making notes in our data tracker. We could be marking students' pages with feedback, letting them know that they're on track, or ask a question to guide their thinking. We could also be directing students to an anchor chart or another resource for support. Now, I'm pretty sure that you guys have already been professionally noticing in your classrooms as it is, right? But this is saying we need to be more intentional. We need to go into the classroom knowing exactly what it is we expect to see and be prepared for how we're going to document it and then move those students forward. Now, let's look at the second strategy, the interview. Interviews are directly connected to observations and involve brief, informal conversations between the teacher and an individual or small group of students. These interactions offer a glimpse into students' thinking and problem-solving processes. It's important to emphasize that interviews aren't only for addressing deficits. Let me say that again. Interviews aren't only for addressing deficits. They're a tool for understanding any student's thinking, no matter where they are in their learning journey. Chances are you're already conducting informal interviews when you ask students to explain their thinking during class. The key takeaway here is to be prepared for these conversations. As you plan, think about the questions you need to ask students at various levels to uncover their thought processes. Now, why is this important? What is the goal of these interviews? We want to be able to meet students where they are to help them reach the day's learning goal. We want to be able to extend their understanding by encouraging them to create alternate strategies or pathways. We also want to be able to connect strategies by collecting and displaying student responses for the class to see. By blending observation and interviews into your teaching practices, you can gain deeper insights into how students think and how they learn. And most importantly, use those insights to guide them towards success. Now, I know all of you guys are engaging in PLC meetings. Think about the meeting where you've been asked to talk about a student. Now, in some cases, you may know a whole list of things to share. In other cases, you might not be too clear. You might not know what to share about a student. Or when we're talking about anticipating student responses, you may be coming up blank, or you could be pulling from your own response toolkit. Well, we're not talking about you, teacher friend. We're talking about the students in your classroom. So these observations and these interviews are going to give you a different vantage point. They're going to give you a different lens from which to pull from and then obviously use. So here's the takeaway. Formative assessments are assessments for learning. They help us guide students and adjust our instruction. They're not about the grade. They are all about the growth. And remember, when we teach the connections, we prepare students for more than just a test. We prepare them for lifelong learning. In my next solo episode, we'll continue this conversation by diving deeper into the other strategies. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you found this episode valuable, share it with a colleague, leave a review. I want us to continue to grow together so that we all can continue to make math happen.